house was right there out on the creek side, and he just hated that outhouse. And, it was hot in the summer, cold in the winter, smelled bad all the time. And Bill just made up his mind, one day I'm going to get rid of that thing. So it wasn't too long after that, and they just had a big storm. The creeks were up, and Bill said this would be a good day to float that one away. And so being a youth, just a young boy, he garnered up a pretty good stout log, and he goes over and he slides underneath that outhouse, gets a good leverage on it, gives it a shove, and away it goes. Bill just took off, headed back to the cabin, back to the farm. A little later in the day, here comes Bill's dad. He says, "Son, let's go to this shed." Bill knew right away there was a reckoning to be made. And he walked out there with the shed, and he says, "Son, you pushed that outhouse into the creek today, didn't you?" Bill thought about it, and he says, "Yes, I did, Dad." And then Bill thought, "But you know, Dad, I read in school today that George Washington, when he chopped down that cherry tree, he told the truth, and nothing happened to him." Bill's dad says, "Yes, Bill, but George's father wasn't in that cherry tree." True story. So just to kind of get this seminar going, I thought maybe what we do is go right to the heart of Big O. And one of the individuals that I think is absolutely paramount in the history of Big O, the foundation of it, the systems that we use, so many of the great ideas and the things that set us apart and make us different, and that's Norm Affleck. And with that, I know that one of the questions that is always asked and always answered, but usually in a different way, depending on who you talk to, and that is how Big O got its name. How did really Big O come to be? And after 22 years, and I know that within your own markets, there's a little confusion at times as to the term Big O and what it means and how it got there. But Norm, share with us, will you? What's the real story?
We had been months trying to come up with a name, and the names we came up with had already been used by other companies and so forth. And so we were at a restaurant up in Burley, Idaho, and it was called the Oasis. And somebody said, "Well, that's a good name for us." And then after that, we had to figure out what it really meant. And it was Tire Store Operators Opportunity Organization. And I think Uncle Tom came up with that. And it was the start of a great organization.
Jim, I'm going to go to you for just a minute, if I might. After working with Jim Stevenson for so many years, I will tell you, and I mean this sincerely, there's very, very few minds that I've ever come to know that have more of an understanding, more of a grasp on Big O Tires and what it represents and what made us great before and what keeps us great now. And I asked Jim some of these questions before we ever got here to this facility. But one of them that I asked him, as I said, "Jim, what do you think is the single greatest strength at Big O?"
Quite often, dealers are referred to as independent tire dealers, but that's not so. The strength is the fact that we're interdependent tire dealers. We depend on one another. We obtain from one another information, support, help. Heaven knows when we were building the Las Vegas stores, we had plenty of volunteer help come over and show us how to do it and help us do it in every way. And likewise, there was reciprocal relationships between all the dealers, and we tried to pay back a little bit ourselves as time went on and help the new dealers get started, not only in the training, but pick and shovel, whatever it took. And so it's truly a multiple ownership, but a singular interest. Everyone has interest in the other's success.
Thank you, Jim. Grant, what do you think? Give us your opinion of that as well, would you please?
I was hoping you'd ask me that, Steve. I think I'll simply refer to the initial purpose of this organization at its inception, which was Big O stands for Bigger Image, Greater Opportunity. That has always stuck with me. The fact that it was a dealer organization with a dealer planning board able to give input to management and allowing a dealer representation on the national board also allowed a greater continuity between the dealer and the National Board of Directors. The Blue Book of Success, we've talked about that a little bit in this last couple of days, which is the combined training manual of ideas from management and dealers. The Dealer Planning Board contributed ideas to that Blue Book. And this, of course, is a blueprint of what it takes to successfully manage a Big O tire store. I think the strength of Big O is taking advantage of all that Big O has to offer. Is everything perfect? No. Are there lots of good things? Yes. The dealer is the lifeline of the company. Without successful dealers, product doesn't move. And if product doesn't move, neither the company nor the dealer can be profitable. It takes a cooperative effort of management and the retail stores for the organization to be successful. I believe therein lies the greatest strength of Big O Tires, management and dealers working together to make certain that the water gets to the end of the road. And I have an analogy of a little story of the geese that I'd like to share that I think is applicable to explain the great strength of Big O. Canadian geese are resilient, hardy, determined, loyal, and tireless. They have an uncanny sense of direction that suggests they know where they are and where they are going while in flight. When the lead goose gets tired, it rotates back into formation, and another, who has been trained and knows the way, flies to the point position. Some geese can't fly more than 1,000 miles without stopping to rest, but they do not fly alone, and that's the key. They fly in flocks. I'm short the sheet. Synchronized together, one at the lead and others in their positions. As each goose flaps its wings, it creates an uplift for the bird following. By flying in a V formation, the whole flock can fly as much as 70% further than if each bird flew alone. And I would ask this question, does this have a parallel with group participation? Geese in formation honk from behind to encourage those up front to keep up their speed. When one gets sick or wounded or shot down, two drop out of formation and follow their fellow member down to help and provide protection. Young geese have to learn that they can only land against the wind. If they land with the wind, they may buckle and tumble along the ground. Competition helps us to maintain stability. In a driving rain or a hailstorm, geese lay their feathers flat and stretch their heads high, reducing to a minimum the body surface exposed to the assault. And I would state this, that successful operators know how to meet every challenge. When geese begin to circle and then land shortly before touching down on the ground, they thrust their feet forward and break themselves with powerful wing beats. They are in control of their direction and in line with their purpose. They are traveling on the thrust of another. Big O Tires is such a force. Management and dealers working together.
Fantastic. Thanks, Grant. Let me pursue another idea here then. Since we've talked so much about the fact that Big O really represents dealer helping dealer, hopefully and obviously management helping dealer and dealer helping management, because that's the way it's always been. One of the mediums that Big O has used consistently to get that communication process has been the committee systems. And I'm talking about either local committee systems or I'm talking National Dealer Board advisory councils, but opportunities where we have to bring people together to talk. I'm going to ask Bill Thomas, if he would, just to share a little bit with us how the committee systems came about in Big O Tires.
Thanks, Steve. First of all, I'd like to say what a pleasure it is to sit up here and look down at all you people. That's been the topic of our conversation for a couple of days. But up here, I'm rather nervous, always have been. And Steve said just before the meeting, he says, if you imagine that they're all naked, it'll kind of relax you. I don't have that kind of imagination. But the committee system started early on, and I had the opportunity yesterday afternoon to talk to several dealers from the Arizona area, young fellows. And they were saying that their area group meetings weren't working very well. And actually, the committee system was created to cure that problem. If you go into a group meeting and you don't have the thing planned properly, what will happen is it will end up as a gripe session. I'm sure all of you have been through that kind of thing. So the committee system was originally thought of as a method to alleviate that problem. In other words, we'd pick people, that in the organization that had expertise in many areas, service, sales, accounting, whatever it was. And all of the problems, gripes, if you will, were directed toward those committees. In the group meetings, everything was supposed to be positive. Everything that we did was to create sales, to create profits. No gripes, no complaints. That was the committee's problem. I think, I don't know because I'm not close enough to it anymore, that probably that isn't being done. Now, I don't know whether I've ever voiced this, what I've just told you. I don't know whether I've ever voiced it before. Have I, Steve? That approach?
I've never heard it, but it makes sense to me, Bill.
But that was the original intention, and it's worked out to be a fine plan, and maybe you have drifted away from that. But that's what I'd have to say about the committee system.
I will tell you, growing up in Northern California, as far as Big O is concerned, I learned it the hard way because I would come into those meetings as, quote, Bill Thomas's assistant, and that helped, believe me. But irregardless, if you brought up a topic for discussion at the owners' meeting and it hadn't been through the committee system, it was usually killed in short order. And you were put back in your place, the topic went back to the committee, and it was brought up the next month in the proper way. And that's the way it ought to be, and it was very, very effective. It really was, and will be today. Ronnie, you've had an opportunity to sit some of those committees on more than one occasion. Are they effective?
You know they're effective, Steve. I didn't realize that you were into geese that much. I got to tell you, Grant, that's why we call him the bishop. But these meetings that we would have, the committee meetings, to me, were really the most important part of our month. We would have our monthly meetings, and along with our committee meetings, I think that you become more involved on the cutting edge. I served myself on several committees. I know that most of you have too. And I actually think that if you don't attend committee meetings, if you don't attend regular group meetings, that you really miss out on what's really, really taking part in Big O. Can you imagine all of those that, for whatever reason, couldn't attend this meeting here at the convention, what they really missed by missing the opening day here? Now, I understand that that's going to be videoed, or has been videoed, and will be sent to the different groups. But I think the very essence of our operating a store and running a business comes out of the committees and the group meetings, and of course the Blue Book and the help that we get from the office at home and so forth. But the committee meetings were always, and the group meetings, the most important time of the month for me.
Thanks, Tom, Ronnie. Tom Staker. Tom, are you an uncle? You are an uncle. I know you're an uncle. I give him a straight line and he can't handle it. And let me just ask you one other question. Are you Uncle Tom? Thank you. Okay. I just want to clear up any confusion that may have been out there. Because as much as I love Tom, and as much as I've learned from Tom in the tire business, Tom is not Uncle Tom Staker. Okay? Norm, who's Uncle Tom?
Well, Uncle Tom was one of the greatest guys in the world. He and I traveled many, many miles recruiting new franchises, new distributors, and so forth. And he was tireless. He just kept going and kept going. And you can tell him a little sentimental about Tom because we were very close. He was very instrumental in cutting out the signs out of marine plywood for the majority of the first 30 stores that went in. He developed the comparison rack, the piano board comparison rack, where we could, for the customer, make it easy for the customer to make a choice in which tire he wanted. He would hold group meetings and was a great speaker. And we just couldn't have, I don't think, made it without him. It was tough to see him gone.
I've been around long enough to hear so many of the stories about Uncle Tom, and I'm just wondering if there's anybody up here who remembers any story they'd like to share about Uncle Tom Staker. Ronnie?
Yeah, this happened at the grand opening over in Dublin, California, and there were several of us out at the store to help out the cherries. And you know, typically when Tom would come into town, he'd get in a hotel or a motel room, and he'd call maybe 8 or 10 of us dealers. And we'd get together and we'd have a session. And I mean, the session was heavy. Sometimes there was liquor involved, and sometimes there was more liquor involved. But it would really, really get heavy, and we would lie to each other, and then the other one would swear to it. And so it was out at the grand opening in Dublin where Tom was going to introduce a new program that he had developed, and it was actually to try to buy tires off of the customers' cars. You'd go out and you'd measure the tread depth, and you'd pay anywhere from $1, $2 a 32nd for the old tires as a trade-in, and be able to switch them into a new set of tires. Now, we had the 5-cent Coke and hot dog program going, and there were a lot of people in the store, and I guess Pete Marrero and myself, Chris Phillips, and a few of us were standing around, and Tom was lecturing us on this program, and in drives this gentleman in a four-wheel drive. And he no sooner opened the door, and Tom was on him. I mean, that VIP program was working, and he introduced himself as Tom from the home office. And that, he got the guy's name was John, and he said, John, what are you here for? He says, well, I'm here to get some hot dogs and a Coke. He said, let me buy those for you. And he reaches in his pocket and goes over and buys him a hot dog and a Coke, and they start to talk, and pretty soon, next thing you know, Tom's on his knee on that right front tire, and he's got a tape measure out, and he starts measuring this guy's tires. Now, that rolling radius program I know that you're all familiar with, he wanted to see if the proper air pressure was in each tire so that the distance from the road to the center of the hub was proper. And pretty soon, the guy's looking at him and looking at him. And he says, come on over here. Let me hold that hot dog. And he takes the guy's hand and he's rubbing it on the top of the tire. He says, you feel that? I said, yeah. So you know what that is? He said, well, it feels like a little cupping. He says, you know what causes that? I said, no. He says, well, I think maybe it's shock absorbers, or could it be an alignment? And he says, no, let me tell you. And he went through the rolling radius program and started talking to him, and we're all glued on him. And pretty soon the guy's handing him the keys to the car. The truck is going around in line. Tom's got a work order going out. He goes in the office. He talks to the girls for a few minutes. And he says, John, it's going to take about an hour and a half to get these tires on here, because I got to tell you, we are busy. So why don't you go get something to eat and come back in about an hour and a half? So everyone's looking at Tom thinking he's a miracle man, and he says, come on, let's go down and have something to eat. So we've taken a little lunch, and we go down to the Chinese restaurant. There was about 5 of us. And he starts to explain the program to us, and of course he talks to the owners of the Chinese restaurant and gives them a card and tells them who he is, home office, there's a grand opening, you got to come out and buy a set of tires. By the time we get done with lunch, we go back, and here's John, and by now, John and Tom are first-name buddies. Tom, how you doing? John, fine, the car's all coming through. Gave him the keys to the car, the guy drove out, he was happy as a lark, everything was fine. And this went on maybe 3 or 4 times during the day where he was able to buy these tires. So finally one time, I guess it got toward closing time or later in the afternoon, we decided to go in and take a look at those tags to see what the heck he was doing. Well, on the first car, he had given the guy $50 a tire. They were worth about 10. And we said, Tom, how can you do this? I mean, anybody can give $50 a tire. So he said, well, you'll make it up in volume. Now, incidentally, that Chinese couple that owned the restaurant came back in and bought a set of big steel tires. And I talked to Kenny the other day, and Kenny was telling me that they came in every 5,000 miles to have the tires rotated, and they got 80,000 miles out of those tires.
I think, thanks, Tony. I don't want to go too fast off this topic. If there's anybody else has anything about Uncle Tom that they want to share, otherwise we'll move on.
One more fast one.
All right.
This is real fast. The same opening. We're in the office. Tom's working on a guy on a set of 4-wheel drive, K70 Sun Valleys, and the guy's not going for it. He's just not going for it. And finally, Tom takes him over to the window, and in the window we had the tire display. And you remember how you had the rock or the gravel down below the tire, and it was all mounted up, and the sun had been beating on that thing all day long, and this tire was really, really cooking. He says, come here, give me your hand. And the guy put his hand, he said, put your hand on this tire. He said, these tires melt right through the ice. The guy said, put them on.
We'd given Tom the job of writing the original Blue Book. And I had a hard time getting him to settle down and do it because he always had to go to Idaho or someplace else. And this went on for months. So I finally sent him up to his home up in the mountains, locked him in there, and made him sit down and write it. And he wrote it in about 2 weeks. So he was a fantastic guy.
And believe me, I know how that works because I was there during the rewrite. And we had the same issue trying to get him to sit down to do it. Noel, how long you been in the tire business?
Jimmy, a little over 50 years.
Why don't you share for us how it all happened?
Well, I got to tell you my first experience, and I think several of you know the fellow that I bought this 1-year-old tire store from, and that was Ken Jones. I don't know how many of you know him, but he was quite a character. And we made a deal to buy this tire store. I mean, it was a huge operation for a total of $1,500. Well, anyway, I made a deal a year before had made a deal a year before that I would buy the store, but Ken had his 2 sons that were getting out of service, and they thought that they ought to get into business with Ken in the retread and tire sales business in Colton. But it wasn't going too good, so he wanted to know if I would take it over, and I said, you bet, because I really wanted to get into business. And so he called me one morning, and he said, I've decided to get out of the tire business. The boys don't want it. And he says, why don't you come over and we'll talk this over. So I lived about 30 miles from there, drove over, and we made the deal to buy the tire store. And he says, when do you want to take it over? I says, right now. And he says, well, have you got the $1,500? No. I says, I got to sell my house and wait till the escrow clears, but I'll have it for you. In the meantime, I had borrowed it from my cousin so that I'd have the cash, and that was Oral Little. And for the total of $1,500. They took the store over, and we're doing a little business, not much. And about 10 o'clock, oh, it was later than that, about 2 o'clock that afternoon, he says, well, I got to get that change out of the till. And I said, wait a minute, Ken. You can't do that. I have to have a little bit of change to make change. Well, he says, just give me a $20 bill. I said, Ken, I don't have a $20 bill. Well, give me a check. I said, I don't have a checking account yet. I said, wait till we get $20 in and I'll give it to you. Well, about 5 o'clock, we got enough cash to make $20, and I gave it to Ken, and that took care of the change. That was where we started. And took over that little store there, and the total month's business the first month was $1,500. Gosh, I had a wife and 3 kids and rented the house, and it was a big chore. But that little business went right straight up.
I think we recognize how much Big O means to the people up here. Let's, Dan, we haven't had the chance to hear from you, and I know that retreading was a huge, huge part of Big O Tires when it first started. In fact, I would say probably retreading was Big O Tires when you first started.
I figured 80% of our business is retreading.
How did it all happen for you, Dan? How did you get into the Big O Tire organization, and where'd you go from there?
I come from the OK Rubber in 1937, and of course we started. I should bring up the stakers. I was the guy that put the stakers into the Big O, or into the OK Tire deal. Sold pump staker into salmon and in the tire business, and Max was my first hired man. And from there, the stakers was always my friends, and Dutro had took Max Staker away from me and put him in business back east somewhere. Then, as things went along, back into the OK, or into the Big O part, it was Miller James who picked off this thing with the opportunity and all the big names on the Big O part. And we ran from there on the Big O deal, organized Norm and a whole bunch of other people in it. We went down from there.
Your retread shop.
I'm no good at this talking, so.
You're doing just fine, Danny. Your retread shop was in Idaho, obviously.
I kept Idaho for my territory, and I had 16 of my own stores and I think 33 franchises.
33 franchises and 16 of your own stores. Danny just mentioned that he kept Idaho for his territory. For those of you who haven't been here with Big O or don't know a lot of the history, Big O was founded on the concept of area directors. And each of the gentlemen that you see up here, the majority of the gentlemen that you see up here, had an opportunity to serve in that capacity as an area director for the company Big O tires, dealers. And each one of them took a state, or in the case of California, half a state, Northern California, Southern California, because Noel's in Southern California, Bill was in Northern California, Norm at one time had all of New Mexico as part of his operation as well. And of course, Danny had Idaho. Who did I miss up here? I think that was it as far as the area directors. But the area directors was a key part of the organization, and I really believe it's what made the organization, because these gentlemen were responsible to build their area. They were responsible to take the Big O concept, the Big O name, and build upon it and develop the territory that they had been given. Bill Thomas, would you just share for us a little bit of what the area directorship, how it influenced the growth of Big O, and how important it was in the history of Big O?
Thanks, Steve. You know, all of us that started Big O had been involved with OK Tire Stores. And when we put Big O together, we brought some of OK's problems along with us. Their field representative system. We continued with that system, I believe, about 6 years and didn't make much progress. And that's when we decided that we had to change. There were, I think, 11 of us that had developed retread plants and distribution centers. We had some owned stores, some franchise stores in our areas. And we decided we would we came up at that time with the area director program. Our pay was based on our performance. And of course that always works, and from then on we really moved ahead. I believe that's about it, Steve.
Okay. Norm is really I know there was a predecessor to yourself for a short period of time as president of the company, but really in the early formation and growth of Big O Tires, Norm was the president of this organization. And it was through his guidance and direction and strengths that this organization did grow and did prosper. But you were probably closest to the concept of area directors because you had to work with them on a regular basis. Give us a little of your insight.
Well, we recognize, as Bill said, that these people in these areas really knew their markets, they knew their people, and much better than we did out of our home office. And we needed to depend on them to relate to us what new programs were needed, the direction that we should continue to go. And I would like to say that I'm very pleased that today a lot of those programs are still in place.
Jim, you had to use the area directors, as did you, Ronnie, and you, Grant. I'll just put Ronnie and Grant on notice. I'm coming back at you for just a comment, if you would, concerning area directorships and how it influenced your participation in Big O, your growth. But Jim, how did it affect you and your organization in Las Vegas?
Well, it affected it in the way of giving us the understanding, the cooperation, and the communication channel that we had, not just with them, but with the other dealers. Because we'd have the regular meetings at the warehouse, and the other dealers under the same warehouse service would get in, and we would exchange ideas, and here we'd get more than we'd give in those cases. But to have that experience together there, to sit and talk about how each one of us could add something and take something from the communication that was taking place, and of course the significant input by the area director herself, who had a strong interest, of course, in seeing that we all were successful. And so we looked to that as our chief source as neophytes coming in, our chief source of absolutely secure information, apart from the pleasantry of being there visiting. Another thing was the delivery of product as we needed it. See that old car truck rolled up with all those tires on it, and we'd have another chance to sit with our area director, warehouse owner, and pass off our problems that we were having. What can we do about this and what can we do about that? So we always had a good counselor with every trip of that truck to come up to our house, plus all the other that we would get from our meetings over there with the other dealers.
Terrific.
Social meeting was significantly important to us too.
Grant, how about you?
Well, I opened my first store in 1966, and I don't think there was a lot of difference then than there is now as far as competition is concerned. It was highly competitive. Volumes of the stores were different, are different, but we had major tire companies for competition, service stations, independent tire dealers, local discount stores, and warehouse outlets. As a group, to meet competition and remain profitability, we tried to create a balance of sales of one new tire, one retread, to one used. In the beginning of the used tire market, we bought our used tires from tire hustlers, supporting our competition. Later, we started buying the used tires from our customers by offering them a trade-in on the unused mileage on their vehicle. We also started on the program of selling 5 and buying the unused mileage on the spare tire as well. It's not only created additional sales, but we also increased the profitability. By following this group program from these beginning years, meeting and understanding competition, and not spending all the profit, it allowed for future expansion. Steve also asked me to comment on what did we do then that still resonates in today's marketplace. I had to look up the word resonate, and I'm still not sure what it means. And when you look it up in the dictionary, you'll probably find the same thing. At any rate, I think I understand what it means in this instance. My beginning may have been a little unusual and different from many that opened or operated stores, not only years ago, but today's market as well. When I opened my first store, I had been retreading tires for 13 years in Arizona. I moved to Northern California and purchased an existing big old store with a little capital from a life insurance policy. I had never met a customer in a retail setting to sell a tire or related services. And I was petrified when I took over that Richmond store, April 1st of 1966. The one thing that was in my favor, there were many, but the one thing was a successful area director that cared about the dealers under his stewardship, and a group organization that also cared. The first day I opened the store, Bill Thomas was there to show interest, but also issued me a couple of challenges. He said, "Grant, you have planned yourself in business today. Tomorrow I want you to start planning yourself out." My initial reaction to that was strange. I later came to know what that meant. The second thing I remember is he said, "This store has never had a $10,000 month. I'll give you 3 months to break $10,000. This I understood, and I made it, but not without a lot of help. I remember Chet Burrows and Lee Reddick from the home office, both living in California, spending 2 weeks at my store building tire racks and scatter racks. They were gems helping out. We ate lots of giant hamburgers and pie, and that was their pay. Gordon Walker came from the Foothill store in Oakland and spent a couple of hours placing the scatter racks with banners and point-of-sale material in appropriate places throughout the premises, and told me to position them like he had placed them that day, every day. I was most dutiful with that, and I remember getting out a piece of yellow chalk and drawing an outline around each scatter rack to make certain it would be in the same place each day. Our group meetings were held in the evening once a month. Each dealer was in attendance. There were 8 of us along with Bill. Eventually, this meeting was expanded to include key employees. Including the key employees proved to be a key ingredient in the success of the group and the stores because they became involved in the operation. Ideas were shared, camaraderie was established, and we succeeded working together. I don't know of anything, as I've had opportunities to serve on dealer planning board, board of directors, there's just nothing like a healthy and successful group operation. This same spirit of lending a hand, bolstering, boosting, and supporting is just as effective today as it was those many years ago. And I am just so grateful to be a part of this wonderful organization.
Thank you, Grant. Ronnie, would you share just a little bit about how you come to know your area director?
Yes, I was very fortunate also. Our area director was Bill Thomas. And Bill, actually, I was working in a liquor store, and Bill Thomas was building 35th and Foothill Boulevard, and that's how I really got into the tire business. He asked me if I'd take a look at what we had here and so forth, and eventually I got involved in a partnership with Gordon Walker, and through Bill's guidance, we started our first store with Grant Gunnell as a partner up in Martinez, California. Do you remember? Bill got together, found a piece of property up there, and Gordy and Grant and myself and Bill became partners. And I don't know if it was Bill that started the management incentive program or not. I'm not quite sure where that actually started, but it was an opportunity to take a manager that worked for us in the store and give that manager an opportunity to buy into the store and eventually own the whole store. And because of that first experience, and it was really quite an experience, we, both Gordy and myself, and then eventually Chris Phillips and myself, were able to grow our stores with the help of Bill Thomas. One of the nice things about having an area director that is so close, if you find a piece of property or you have a question, or if you ran into a little problem, it was no more than a telephone call away and he would be there. I could tell you Bill loved to come to the store or have you come down to his office to look at a set of plans, or he'd go out and look at a site with you. And it really created the excitement, because it worked, as Bill used to say many times, I'm not doing this thing just for you. I have to tell you that I'm being unselfish for selfish reasons. And Bill gave us all an opportunity to buy into the warehouse. I believe there were 8 of us, Grant, weren't there, that got a chance to buy into the warehouse. And not only did he give us a chance to buy into the warehouse, he paid off the notes by giving us volume purchase rebates. I'm forever, ever indebted to Bill.
You know, in 1986 and shortly thereafter, I'm sorry, Grant.
Just one comment about Bill that falls in line with what Ronnie is saying. Something that I learned from Bill, and I shall always remember. He often said, $1 for you, $1 for me. That's the kind of a man he was.
We obviously get to hear a lot about Bill's background because we happen to have a couple of Hall of Fame members here. But I will tell you, being with the organization as long as I have, I've heard the same stories from other dealers from all over the country as it pertained to their area directors, and the appreciation that existed there, and and quite frankly, the devotion, the loyalty that existed to them was what made each individual group strong, and why we were able to grow the system. Obviously, things don't remain the way they are forever. And the area directorships certainly fulfilled their role and got Big O to the point where it could not only sustain itself, but it was a very, very strong organization as a result of their input. In 1985, 1986, we looked to retire a lot of the area directors, gave them the opportunity to go fishing, sailing, hunting, horse riding, fence building, whatever happened to be their thing. And from that point forward, the company had an opportunity and an obligation to try and continue that growth and to foster many of the ideas and the principles that made Big O great as a result of their founding efforts, and then to continue that through the organization. And I really believe that while you certainly can't duplicate exactly what an area directorship can bring to a store. When I grew up in Big O, Bill wasn't Bill. Bill was the godfather. It's just the way it was. And we would go to a group meeting, and we'd have a very lively discussion for about 10 or 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or until Bill got tired of listening to it. And then when he stood up, everybody knew the discussion was over. Bill had reached a decision, or he was just tired of hearing it, and he brought that to an end. But that's the way it was. But as Big O has moved forward, there's tremendous people that have been put in place, and that continues today as people who have that responsibility as management of Big O Tires to carry that same idea, to carry that same theme, to carry that same obligation and responsibility back to the dealers, because this organization always has been, always will be a organization of dealers. And the strength of this organization is in the dealerships. It's the people who make it up. One of the greatest assets that I think that Big O Tires has to offer its dealers is a unique product line. It's something that differentiates us from the competition. Most of our competition would like to think that their light truck tire can do everything that a Bigfoot can. But we know that it can't, because the one thing that it can't do is it can't create the image, the impression, the service, the follow-through, the satisfaction that comes from selling your own product with your own name on it. And one of the guys, obviously, that was most responsible for bringing that about, again, was Norm. Norm, how did we get into the Big O Tire business?
Well, I started out in 1945. My father-in-law loaned me $7,000 to get into business. And so I started up in a little town of Alamosa, Colorado, a population of 5,000 people. And I had passed up an opportunity to fly for United Airlines because I had a lot of hours in four-engine aircraft in service. And I can recall one day I had a 56-cent day. Say the least, I was questioning what I had done. But was just a couple of years, I was able to pay that $7,000 back, build a new building, expanded my business, and to a business that was heavily in retreading. It included clear up through earth mover tires, farm tires, and so forth in the small community of Alamosa. And as has been said, the OK franchise to start with was very good for us. It was a lot of us started from practically nothing and had built businesses. And but we came dissatisfied with what was going on. The founder, Harold James, headquartered there in Littleton, Colorado, was living in the past. He hadn't modernized his equipment. There was a lot better equipment available for retreading. The price we were paying for tread rubber was almost double what we could buy elsewhere. So a handful of us decided that instead of trying to take control of the company, we should start our own company. And that's how Big O got started. We had our first meeting of our Big O people was in 1962. That's when we formed the company. Prior to that, we had an organization called OK Tire Dealers Incorporated, and that was the foundation from which we formed Big O. So from that, we were able to expand, and one secret I think that we have to talk about is that we always made certain that we did things differently than the rest of the industry. That was our exclusive. When the rest of the industry was going one way, we went the other. The rest of the industry was moving away from retreads. We were big in retreads because we really didn't have any good competition in that field. Then we were part of an organization and private brand group called Sonic Tire, and we used that as our exclusive tire, but knowing that it really wasn't exclusive because we had some competition, potential competition out there in future years from other distributors and so forth. So in 1973, we decided that we really needed something that was exclusive to us. So we made arrangements with Uniroyal to manufacture a tire for us with our big old name on it. With that tire, we could expand our free replacement warranty to cover new tires as well as our retreads. I'll never forget, we would advertise, as happens today, a low-priced new tire, sell down to our retread for a profit, and then we'd sell up to our big O tire. The average tire price in those days on new tires was $25. We were selling the big old tire for $60. So that gave us the exclusive that our competition didn't have. I knew most of our competition on a first-name basis, and they kept telling me, "We don't understand. How do you do it?"
Thank you, Norm. Average price, $25. Not a lot of change from today, is there? What else do you remember about the, we started out with a tire under the big old line. What kind of tire was it?
Well, it was a bias ply. That was in the days that the manufacturers in the United States were reluctant and sometimes financially unable to convert to the radial tire that Michelin had come out with, and that today we know was a superior tire. So the U.S. manufacturers thought, well, we'll start with putting a belt on our bias ply tire, and that'll give us more mileage. Maybe we can compete with the radial tire. A lot of them had very little faith in the original radial tire, and so that was our only supply. We even had a Bigfoot tire back in those days, the Bigfoot 60, the Bigfoot 70 bias ply, and that was a tire that got well known all over the nation, along with our other brands that we had. We had, I think, 14 different lines of tires at that time.
Terrific. We've got a few more questions here I want to ask the Hall of Fame members, but I'd kind of like to give the audience an opportunity. If you have a question that you would like to pass on to any one of the Hall of Fame members, we'll get to a point here in just a few minutes where I'll give you that opportunity. So be thinking about it. I know they love to talk about their history. They love to talk about their experiences. I hope you enjoy listening to them as much as I do. Noel, Southern California, what was it like when you and the Southern California organization was trying to do business down there?
Well, I always remember that things were pretty tough. We were always looking up to see bottom, but it was one of those things that was always competition. And I always remember home office always knew what the price should be. And seemed like we were $2 lower than the Bay Area and $2 higher than the San Diego area. So it was always tough competition. But competition was a lot of fun. And being in the retail business was one lot of fun. Having customers that you could call by name and knew everybody when they came in, or almost everybody, And hardest thing I ever did was to have to close, or not close my store, but sell that store so that I could take over the warehouse and retread plant. Well, I took on a pretty tough competition, and this is not really the question Steve asked me, but and went out to that retread plant and gave up a real good business to my right-hand man, let him buy it out, and took over that warehouse with about $500,000 in debt. And I wasn't used to being in debt, especially not that far. But everything worked when you got dealers that you can work with, and man, it was just a lot of fun. And it was an awful, awful tough job to walk out of that store and not be back in there for a while, because I couldn't hardly stand to go back in there. But it was just great, and everything did go straight up. We had one of the, I think, most profitable warehouses. Wasn't long we had it out of debt, and it was all because of the local dealers' support and our good customer base. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Noel. I think one of the most important concepts in the processing of customers at Big O Tires has always been the speed lane, the express lane, and it goes by many names. But it's a concept that's been around a long time, and I'm going to call upon Norm one more time just to tell us how that concept came about.
Well, as been previously mentioned, the practice in those days was to park the cars in front of the store and use floor jacks to jack it up, air wrenches to take the wheels off. And out in front of the line of vehicles, we had tire changers and balancers and so forth. And I got to thinking, you know, that's not a real efficient way of doing. Sometimes the customers had to leave their vehicle there half a day, all day, come back and pick it up. And it took our employees extra time taking care of those customers. And I was driving through a car wash. And in the old days, you know, the car wash was a hand wash thing, and generally the outside and wasn't very efficient. And along came the companies that set up the automatic car wash, and they'd drive through this car wash, and in a matter of a couple of minutes, I was washed and gone. And I thought, well, that's a good concept. And I happened to be in a Ford Motor Company factory and watched how the vehicles moved down the production line, and they were using pads underneath the frames or the unibodies in those days also, and that's how they moved it down the production line. And I said, well, that'll work in our stores. So I, along with a gentleman, an inventor by the name of Bob Royce, came up with the first lift, and it was the first pad lift for retail tire stores, and it automatically adjusts itself to the vehicles until there got to many different sizes and shapes of vehicles. It would no longer do that, and then we just went to the flat pads that you use now, and set it up as the speed lane, and at times, as you say, we called it the express lane. And we found that we could install a complete set of tires on the average of 15 minutes, have them balanced and gone. And that way the customer didn't have to leave their car, come back and get it. And it probably set us more aside from our competition than anything we did.
Thank you, Norm. Ronnie, you shared an experience with me on the phone about how you found out about the express lane or the speed lane. Share it with us, will you?
Yeah, it was another Tom Staker program. And he called us on the phone and said, fellas, you got to come out and see this. It's working really terrific. And so we went up into Twin Falls, Idaho, I believe it was. And half of the fun, though, was getting there. We flew into town and Tom had an airplane and put a bunch of us in that airplane, and we never should have got in the plane because I'll tell you, it was a windy, rainy, stormy day. And that plane flipped around up in the air, back and forth, and I remember Tom, you know, one of his favorite things is things started sputtering and we were all scared. I know that several of us have taken different plane rides with him. But this thing was, he says, this damn Japanese gas. He says, I don't know if we're going to make it. Well, we did. We got into town and we went and we were met there by some of the group members there, and we went out and looked at the speed lane actually in action. And it wasn't, I mean, we were standing so tall, we couldn't wait to get home. And we had started calling the cement wall cutting people. We were cutting holes out of the back of our building, figuring ways to drive through the, with a service lane or speed lane. And it changed the way I know we operated down at 35th and Foothill. It changed the way we build our stores now, and it was probably the single biggest, development in the speeding of the way we put tires on in stores.
Thanks, Ronnie. Gentlemen, the last question I really want to pose to this particular group, and it's one that none of you have seen before, none of you have been briefed on, but there's something unique about Big O. There's something very, very special. In your own words, if you would like, share with this particular group, in your opinion, what is the heart of Big O?
The heart of Big O is the people. I'm acquainted and have been for many years with a lot of different tire companies, competitors and so forth, and you don't find the people and the cooperation, one helping another. We'd have grand openings and people would drive in from all over the country. We even had parades of our pickup trucks, and we built floats celebrating. We'd have the mayor and cut a ribbon for the grand opening. But the success of it was the dealers coming in together. We learned from each other at those grand openings. And I've got a funny story I want to tell you about a guy that most of you know. And we were at a grand opening in Pocatello, Idaho. And at that time, it was the largest Big O store in the country. And Dan and I were walking through the service bay together, and Dan says, who's that guy on the tire changer over there? And I said, I don't know. I've not seen him before. And so Dan walked up to him and says, who are you? Why are you here? And he says, well, I saw that you had a grand opening, and I thought that maybe I could help you, and if I did a good job, you might hire me. Come to find out, it was Stoney.
Dean Stone.
Dean Stone.
Great story. Grant?
Steve, I would agree that it's people. I remember when Ronnie left the liquor store and came on board. We had a lot of friendly competition going among the 8 dealers in those early beginning years of Northern California. And Oakland generally led the pack. There was one month that I did in Richmond $20,000. Oakland was $18,000 and something. The next day after that was printed, and Ronnie found out about it, he was out at my store. He was wanting to see what was going on. But before he left, he pointed his finger at me, and I can still see him doing it. He said, Grant Gunnell, you will never beat Oakland again. And I didn't. He also has brought in many people into the organization. A former partner of mine, Bruce Gold, was brought in through Ronnie, and I mention this because it's people who, and that gave me an opportunity to enjoy future expansion. The heart of Big O, I would have to say now, is this, but in the early beginning, I applaud the names of Norm Affleck, Bill Thomas, Darwin Gunnell, Dan Howarth, Clarence Snow, Guy Burgess, and Miller James. That's why we're here we are today.
Anyone else? Ronnie?
It's a feeling of an extended family is what it really means to me. It's seeing a son. It's something that happened here the other day. It's a story that my wife would probably tell better than I will, but she called here to the hotel about 3 weeks ago, knowing that we were coming here, to see if we could make a reservation in the dinner house, thinking that with the entire convention that maybe there wouldn't be room left. And the young lady that handled the phone made the reservation for us and said, now, you know, we have an outstanding brunch on Sundays, and I think that you might want to consider making a reservation for that. Well, she said she'd think about it, and then we talked about it. She hung up the phone and decided that maybe we'd do that. And she called back and said that I was talking to so-and-so, and she said, well, she's not here right now, but I can help you. And the lady helped her, and we made the reservation. She said, you know, I'm with Big O Tires. She said, Big O Tires? Let me tell you a little story. She said, the other day I was in an automobile agency, and there happened to be a man down there sitting next to me, and we were talking about service. And you know, we couldn't stop talking about Big O Tires. And she said, there's a couple guys in the area here, Bruce and Scott, who have a funny last name. But she said, they have done nothing but treat me and my family wonderfully, and I'll never forget them. And she said, and by the way, I have a very funny name. She said, my name is Mary Sue Wildman. And I got to tell you, that's what Big O is about. It's about this family, and it's about the customers and the relationships that we've built over the years.
Thank you, Ronnie. Anything else from this distinguished group? Any questions from the audience that you'd like to have these guys field? Bill?
The Goodyear suit on the Bigfoot.
Oh, yes.
When Uncle Tom was on the stand and he was sworn in, you got to share that story.
Which of you would like to share that story about swearing in of Uncle Tom at court? Norm?
Well, yeah, that was a funny story. You know, that was part of our growth in Big O. Goodyear had decided that they wanted to use the Bigfoot name. And we felt that it was important that we protect that name and the integrity of Big O, because if Goodyear had come out with the name, then we would look like we had copied something from Goodyear. So we took them to court. And we won it. We got a $14 million judgment first, and finally settled with Goodyear. Took it to the Supreme Court in 1 year, the federal Supreme Court, and settled for $6 million. Well, while they were examining Tom, they asked him, you know, what his position was. And he said, well, I don't really know. He says, I do a little bit of everything. And so I think what you're talking about was his response to that.
When they asked him what his job was, and I think as I heard it historically, he simply told him that he was the world's greatest tire salesman.
That's correct. And he was.
Dean, uh-oh.
There's just a couple of people here I'd like to thank. With the lights in your eyes on the stage, Dan Howarth and Norm Affleck, this is Dean Stone. Dan hired me in 1966 in Pocatello, and it's kind of like Ronnie was complimenting Bill. I want to thank you two guys for everything that you have done for me and my family in the Big O. Thanks, guys.
Tom told me when he was on the stage, he was asked what authority that he could say he's the best tire dealer in the world. And in a sober face, he turned to the judge and he said, because I'm under oath.
Oh.
I think that's correct.
That's true. You're right. Thank you, Bill, for sharing that. I hadn't heard that. Any other questions that we can pose to this group? Okay. I'm sorry. Over here, John or Kelly.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, just something to say. Sometimes it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool and open your mouth and move all down. In the last several years, I've interacted with people, and I say, we're all in this life together. Don't you understand? So what I'm going to say to you, man, my wife's sister was in the retread business in Durant, Oklahoma. And just wanted to share that with you, that it's ironic that we could sit here and listen. It kind of comes to the surface here. And in 1972, her husband went in one morning and plugged in a tread machine and killed himself. And but really, the point I'm trying to make, it's nice to see people interact together, and it's a real privilege to be associated with Big O at this point. And we started in June, and my goal is to exemplify what you guys have commented on, and really appreciate you. We are all in this life together.
Thank you.
Steve, I would like to compliment John Adams and his staff for the fine job they've done. I go to a lot of conventions, and there was never been one that is as well organized as this one.
Norm, I appreciate that. But I think everybody knows that it's not me that puts this on. We've got a great group of people, and we'll talk about them tomorrow. I'm humbled to be on this stage with you gentlemen. Steve, Dan, welcome to the Hall of Fame. The rest of you, ladies and gentlemen, these are the people that started our great company.